Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, my toboggan-wearing buddy, in a new studio setup here at the Bourbon Life Studios that did not work properly tonight because it's my fault. Technology sucks sometimes, but my good friend, my buddy, my pal, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you trying to set me up with a new studio here at the Bourbon Life Podcast, a new wing of the studios, but technology once again just pulled the plug on us and really let us down. So I had to go with the old trusty 11-year-old laptop of mine to get us through this one. But hey, man, I'm doing great. How are you this evening, Mark?
I'm doing good other than the technology issues. But you know what? We're just going to blame it on COVID because we can blame everything on COVID right now. So COVID sucks. And it messed up our whole technology setup tonight. And I'm just going to go with that. So we're going to leave it at that. But I need to thank our sponsors, Matt, before we jump in the show, because we got a great one tonight. I'm really excited, man. This has been on the calendar for a couple months, and I've been really excited to get this one out there to everybody. So let me thank our sponsors again. That's the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky. They're located there between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve on McCracken Pike out there on the banks of Glens Creek. Was just out there, as a matter of fact, last weekend and had a delicious lunch. They got a new chef, Kyle Klatka's out there. Making some great food. So check them out. You can check them out online, thestavekentucky.com. You can order and pick up to go, but they do have indoor seating is finally open again. So you can actually, and we got to go and sit inside the restaurant. It's great. They've done some refurb in there. It's a really cool little place. If you've not checked it out, if you're out on the Bourbon Trail, taking tours or whatever, definitely stop by and see them, thestavekentucky.com. And then also 3 Chord Bourbon, our newest sponsor. We're very appreciative of their support. And we really appreciate everything that Ari Sussman, the master blender with those guys, what he does and what they're putting out. And we really appreciate their support. So Matt, with that said, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. Let's waste no time because we are going to have a ripper of a show tonight. Joining us on the Bourbon Life Podcast is the co-founder and the chief innovation officer, and a name that most people are probably very familiar with. But the chief, of Angel's Envy, I should mention where he is the co-founder and chief innovation officer from. But Mr. Wes Henderson is joining us. Wes, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast this evening.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man. Great way to spend an evening with you guys, drinking some bourbon and telling lies and war stories.
Well, that's what we prefer, and I think our listeners really enjoy that. And when it comes to bourbon, that's what a lot of it is about, right? Just being able to share it with friends and even new people that you meet, but also being able to tell some great stories. So that's what we love to do here on the Bourbon Life Podcast. And so we're really appreciative of you joining us tonight. I know we had initially talked about potentially doing this over at the distillery, but again, there's number 2 I can blame on COVID. So we're just going to blame that on COVID and say COVID sucks. And when we're going to do it, we're doing it remotely, which works for everybody. So we really appreciate you being here. So the way we do this, Wes, we just jump right in really, and we start talking about what we're drinking. So in this first round, we have poured up what I consider to be really your flagship product, your expression, your bourbon, that's finished in port wine barrels, but I don't want to really talk about it because it's your product. So if you don't care, you would just kind of tell our listeners what it is we have poured up here on this first round.
So the first round, and we do call this our flagship bourbon. This is what we started off with, launched in 2011. It's crazy. It's been 10 years. It doesn't seem like it. Time has really flown. And this is our and this is what we do. This is our bourbon finished in port wine barrels. And when I say finished, I mean that's really kind of become the cornerstone of what we do here at Angel's Envy. And we can talk more about that as we go along. But that wasn't necessarily what we set out to do at the beginning. That's just, where we started and where we ended up. But so this is a 4 to 6 year old bourbon finished in a port wine barrel, a ruby port wine barrel, for up to 6 months. And,
Okay.
it's 86.6 proof. And, this is what, if you like Angel's Envy, this is what you're accustomed to seeing most of the time on the shelf. And for a lot of people, this, not only is it a bourbon that people who enjoy bourbon regularly seem to like it, it's also been an introductory bourbon to a lot of people I've seen over the years. And that port barrel finish just really gives it a nice texture, a nice, it's very accessible and very drinkable. So it's nice to kind of live in both worlds there.
Sure. Yeah. And that's it's interesting because it is a straight bourbon. Like you said, it's 4 to 6 years. But it's also, and then it's finished in the port wine barrels. So that's an interesting, concept. Obviously finishing is becoming more and more popular, but I mean, you guys, when I think back in terms of bourbon, Angel's Envy really was the group that started that, in my opinion. I mean, was there anybody else really out there doing it before you guys started?
No, there really wasn't. You go back and look at the Jim Beam did a masterpiece release back in the mid 90s.
Okay.
That Elmer did mid to early, actually probably early 90s. It was decent. It wasn't great. It was good, but it more than anything, it just wasn't time. It wasn't the right time. And my father at Brown-Forman had played around with finishes for years and years before that, but we decided to step out on the ledge and make that our first offering. And
Sure.
As you probably remember, there was a little bit of noise when we started doing it because nobody was familiar with people finishing bourbon in a secondary barrel, and quite honestly, nobody really knew how to deal with it.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it bourbon? Is it not bourbon? What do we have going on here? But it's really interesting to see now, like you said, we're seeing finished bourbons, finished other spirits all over the place now.
Right. So I'm just curious, you kind of brought that up when you were talking there a second ago about people had never seen it. I mean, what was the initial reaction to you all deciding, hey, we're gonna take a bourbon, finish it in a wine barrel, and then release that as our flagship product? I mean, what was the response? What did people initially think to that?
Well, it wasn't necessarily going to be our flagship. It was going to be our first release under the Angel's Envy label. And, it could have been finished in, I love fortified wines and they work so well with bourbon. The first could have been a sherry. It could have been a Madeira. It could have been, finished in a lot of other things. And truthfully, the reason we started with Ruby Port is they were the easiest barrels for me to get at the very beginning. And that was our jump spot. So, we have as a family, and as long as Dad has been in the industry and now as long as I've been in the industry, I think we have a great relationship with the bourbon community. Sure. And Dad coming out of retirement piqued a lot of interest at the very beginning. So, I think people are like, well, if the Hendersons are doing this, there must be something there. Mm-hmm. So I truly believe that people gave us a chance early on because of that.
Right.
Whereas other people might not have gotten that same chance,
Sure.
Because we had the kind of the pedigree or the whatever. I don't know, pedigree is a good word, but
no, that's good. That's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. We had the experience,
Right.
But there was some noise. Just like I said earlier, is it bourbon? And actually I say, no, it's not bourbon. It's bourbon finished in port wine barrels.
Right. Yeah.
It's bourbon and more.
That's a good description. No, I like that. So talking about the bourbon itself, what's the what can you tell what the mash bill, or can you tell us what the mash bill is, or approximation?
72% corn, 18% rye, and 10% malted barley. So it's a fairly traditional, maybe just a little bit higher on the rye. Maybe 1 or 2% higher on the rye. Then very similar to the Woodford mash bill that Dad created
right.
Brown-Forman. Mm-hmm. Except not with the same stills, that they have at Woodford, those Scottish pot stills, which by the way, my dad never really fell completely in love with those things. They were really sexy, but he ended up really kind of preferring what we do now, and that's a column distillation along with the pot still distillation. So
yeah, we had Chris on the show a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact. So it was fun to talk to him, and we talked about your dad a little bit as well. So
Chris is great. I mean,
yeah.
I've known Chris for years, and and Chris and I've I think really kind of got to know each other better, serving on the KDA board of directors together.
Right.
And he's done some great things, but at Brown-Forman, those pot stills gave him fits at the very beginning. I don't know if Chris talked about that or not, but it took him a minute to figure out how to really make good whiskey out of those stills, because they just weren't manufactured, I think, in a way that was really user friendly. But now they're killing it now. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Obviously, and to me, being a lifelong Kentuckian, there's a Bourbon Life bingo for everybody listening at home. Mark's a lifelong Kentuckian. Go, how many times have I said that, right? So, but that's Woodford is something. I mean, it's only been around since '96, but it seems like it's been around forever almost. It just seems like when you think of Kentucky bourbons, that's one of the ones that just comes to mind. So, but yeah, we had fun with Chris for sure. And like I said, we talked about your dad, so that was really nice. So Matt, getting back to the bourbon, I see you over there sniffing it. I can still see you. That's great. So at least some of the setup is working. We've not completely shut down. So what are you picking up on it, Matt?
It's I think the ruby port barrels really do impart a nice, like I'm getting a very ruby juicy nose on it. It's got a like strawberry and almost a little tartness, like a little cranberry with it. But the sweetness really shines through. And then there's a touch of pepper with it as well. I think that 18% rye kind of lends to a little bit of a peppercorn, little peppery nose on it as well.
Yeah, I knew that would get your attention when you said the 18% rye, Matt, because I know Matt's a high rye. I mean, and that's, to me, I consider that to be kind of one in the higher rye areas on a bourbon when you're at 18%. So Matt enjoys that rye. So I'm not picking out the spice so much, Matt, but the sweetness that you talked about, there's no question about it, man, that it comes through for sure. So Wes, what else do you get? What do you get on the nose on this one? Since, I mean, this is your product. So
I get all that and more, I mean, I get that little bit of oakiness, maybe some cherries, which also comes through in the flavor, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And that's the dried fruits, a little bit of banana, some toffee.
Interesting on the banana, because usually, it's funny because I like to pick that out for some reason. Especially, we talk about Brown-Forman, talking about their types of products. A lot of times, especially like the Old Forester stuff, you pick out that banana scent. And I'm not picking that out here, but now I'm going to start subconsciously, Wes. I'm probably going to start searching for that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like, oh yeah, now I pick out that.
See it. Now I smell it.
Now I get the banana. So do our listeners a favor. Let's, we've talked about the first round here just a little bit, and we'll come back to it in a second. But can you tell our listeners just a little bit about who you are and how you got into the industry and how you got where you are, so people get to know who Wes Henderson really is.
Oh, wow. I mean, I grew up in this business with my, going to work with my dad on weekends. Dad was at Brown-Forman almost 40 years. And, ended up creating Woodford, Gentleman Jack Daniel's Single Barrel, a bunch of other amazing products. So I was really probably a science geek at heart. And, Dad really fostered that. But to me, I mean, look, my dad was a chemist. At the end of the day, I mean, that was his background, and Dad really appreciated the chemistry behind making bourbon and maturation, how wood influenced distillate. So, even though he became a more public facing person, later in his career, really back in the day, nobody knew who made the bourbon. Nobody knew, nobody cared. It was not so that always fascinated me. But my first jobs were at 15, believe it or not, were in radio. I was an on-air radio guy, in Louisville, at some flagship radio stations here in town as well. Some big rock stations here in Louisville, which was always a lot of fun. Ended up eventually going to Brown-Forman for a few years. Did not really care for the Fortune 500 gig. Sure. Left the business. Honestly, never thought I would come back to it. Really didn't. Got into other ventures, entrepreneurial ventures and things like that. And Dad retired from Brown-Forman, and that's what got the wheels turning in my head that it might be fun to do bourbon as a family. So I started Angel's Envy, got Dad out of retirement, and we're off to the races. So I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but
no, that's perfect. I mean, people want to know what your experience has been, where you came from, what your background was, and it seems like I saw somewhere something about you studied aeronautics. Is that right?
Yeah, I like to fly airplanes, which I don't really have a lot of time to do that now, unfortunately. But I think it all comes back to the technical aspects of flight, and and the technical aspects of bourbon, and they're really intertwined. If you have that attention to that detail,
right?
So they're really not all that different if you think about it.
Sure.
But I'm really happy where I landed.
No pun intended.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. We're having a lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun as a family. So I still I've got some other passions on the side that I do, and at the same time, just spread the bourbon gospel.
Yeah, that's great. We try to do that on a much smaller scale than what you do, but we're passionate about this, and like I said before, I'm a lifelong Kentuckian. I mean, bourbon is has such a huge impact on our economy, on the entire state. So for me as an attorney now, it's a hobby, it's a passion, and it's something that's really fun to be able to do, and share that passion with as many people around the world as I can. So it's our little way to do that, but you guys do it on a much better scale.
Look, it's a cooperative here, man.
There you go.
Takes a commonwealth, right?
That's right. It's funny you said that you were in radio, because before we started and we were talking a little bit, I thought that this is probably, without you having an actual mic and headphones and everything set up in a studio, I'm like, man, this guy is probably one of the best voices of one of our guests that I've ever. Everything sounds clear and it's nice. There's no echo. There's no reverberation. There's nothing. So you're going to make our editing job really, really easy.
I aim to please, man. Whatever I can do.
Well, we appreciate that. So let's talk about the bourbon a little bit again. We talked about the nose and stuff. What do you get on the palate on this one, on the flagship bourbon?
On the palate, I think right at the start, I pick up the sweetness of the corn, the 78% corn in there. It really comes through right at the start. And then it's giving way to like a nice toasted sugar. And then the finish is where I'm picking up a lot of the stone fruit, the strawberry and cherry, and a little bit of that pepper as well. And then there's a nice burnt sugar and oak finish, like at the very, very end of it as well, to finish it off.
Yeah, I'm really digging the finish on this one too, because it's number one, to me, it drinks higher than 86.6 proof, in my opinion. I don't know if you feel that way, Matt, but to me, it drinks higher than that proof point. But in terms of the finish, the spiciness that I get, I love the sweetness. It's very, very unique, because you do get you can pick out those bourbon notes to it, but at the same time, you can tell that port barrel has influenced what's going on here. But then that rye, that spiciness comes through on the finish, and I like that tingle, that sensation, that spiciness that I'm picking up on the palate, and then also on the finish. Wes, what about you? What else do you get on that?
Guys, I couldn't said it any better, honestly. Really, I mean, you covered it. I think that and one of the things that I think makes Angel's Envy have such a wide appeal, it's got a nice viscosity, it's got a nice mouthfeel, it coats the palate. The port, the residual grapes from the port wine give it that texture and then that mouthfeel, and helps coat, and that gives it the long finish. So that's something that really, I mean, I don't know if I anticipated that when we first started doing this, that we get that much residual grape, those microscopic particles of grape. But it's one of those pleasant surprises when we got it. We're like, oh, wow, this is, but all the other things that you guys described, I think are very, very, very prevalent, and they're really good observations.
So when you started this back in 2011, you launched, so you were doing a little bit of research and development before that. What was the learning curve like going through? Because nobody on the market really had any finished product at the time. Were you writing the book and kind of just figuring it out as you went, or did you have a plan going into it? Like, what was the trial and error, and how did you come about and deal with the challenges to get a product to market?
That's a really good question. I mean, there really wasn't a book. There was one of the challenges that when I asked Dad to do this project with us, I wanted him to have fun with it, and I wanted him to maybe think about things that. And also in the back of my mind, truthfully, I don't know if Dad was quite ready to retire or not. I mean, Dad got to to that age where a lot of companies are, a lot of times it's time to retire. And
right.
I kind of felt like Dad maybe had some other things up his sleeve that I wanted to kind of maybe coax out of him, and show those things off a little bit. But most importantly, I just wanted to work with Dad, and that was what we set out to do. So to stimulate Dad's thought process, I asked him, talk about some things that you did, in your previous life or when you were working at Brown-Forman that you thought was fun, but for whatever reason never saw the light of day, or something you wanted to pursue more. And we kept circling back to the secondary barrel finishes. And, I just keyed in on that as something, wow, this is a way to have Dad really be excited about what we're doing and forge a path for us. And like I said earlier, we didn't set out to create the category or create the world of finished bourbon. We really didn't. That was just where we were going to start, and it kind of caught on. So we, there wasn't a lot of trial and error. We knew once we decided we were going to do that from a taste profile standpoint, we knew right away. I knew right away, especially where I wanted to go with that. And Dad agreed. And, it was a pretty simple process at that point.
Yeah, very good. Matt always asks the great questions. One of these days I'm going to be able to do that, but Matt always asks those really good questions. But great answer. Yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, that's really cool to get a kind of an inside look at how you all made that decision and how you move forward with that. So, all right, we are actually at the end of round one. Believe it or not, that was pretty quick. That was really quick. So closing thoughts, Matt, on the flagship, the bourbon finished.
Just go ahead and say it. Best ever. That's fine.
There you go.
I'm good with that.
I've got nothing to add to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's funny because, in my mind, Wes, a lot of times when I think or hear of finished bourbons, it to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, I don't know that I'm really going to like that. But the more that I drink, especially your product and the entire line of products that I've had, they're very unique, and they're still very bourbon centric. Mm-hmm. And like you said earlier, you're talking about a kind of an introductory bourbon, which kind of sounds weird when you say, yeah, it's a bourbon finished in a wine barrel, but still from the standpoint of introducing someone to a bourbon, I think this would be a great jumping off point for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there are lots of bourbons out there that are like that. I think Makers is another one that right. A lot of people think of as, I think we're a lot more complex than Makers. Not that I don't love Makers, I do, and I love Bill Samuels and all those guys. But I think that a lot of people look at that as a gateway bourbon. But I think we bring a little more to the table as far as
sure.
That added, kind of that added complexity with that port barrel finish.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that's why Makers being, those type of Woodford, very good introductory type bourbons that are just straight bourbons. But yeah, definitely you guys bring a little bit of that difference with that port finish. Makes a difference. And again, it doesn't, in my mind, doesn't take it out of that bourbon category, which I know some purists would probably say, oh, wait a second, it's finished. But no, to me, it'd be a great jumping off point for a lot of people. So for me, it's 2 thumbs up, and it's an affordable bourbon. There's no question about it. So the bottle shape is awesome. We can talk more about that in the second session as well. What you guys have in terms of your bottle presentation and marketing. So, Matt, any final thoughts on the first round before we close it out?
It's fun to go back and visit this one. This was when I was just getting into bourbon. This was one of the first bottles that I bought. And at the time, I hadn't really had too much other bourbon. And I guess I didn't really know enough to know about it and really be able to chase out some of what I was tasting. So it's fun to go back to this many years later now and taste it with a different mindset, the same palate, but different mindset. And especially with you, Wes, to hear the story behind it. So this is a fun experience for me, especially.
Appreciate that. I hear that a lot as far as Angel's Envy being one of the first bourbons that is really, I mean, where we are in the bourbon world really started about the time we launched Angel's Envy,
Right.
that huge upswing. So
Right.
there's a large number of people that cut their teeth on Angel's Envy, High West, Whistle Pig, Smooth Ambler, all these brands that all these guys are dear friends of mine. We've all kind of grown up together, as companies, and we've grown up with our consumers,
Sure.
as we've all expanded our bourbon horizons, which is fun for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. You can probably tell by my image. People can't see obviously during the podcast, but you can tell that I've been around a little bit longer than Angel's Envy. So I cut my teeth on some other stuff. So
there you go. That's okay.
All right, guys, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. Take a little break, and we'll be right back with more with Wes Henderson with Angel's Envy in just a second. Hey, Bourbon Lifers, when you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at the Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. With a newly redesigned menu, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it. The food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country. All right, everybody, welcome back for round and/or session 2, whichever you prefer to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there in the brand new setup in the Bourbon Life Studios?
Oh man, I'm doing great over here, breaking in the new wing of the Bourbon Life Studios here, the new setup. It's good to be away from the draft of your patio door on those cold winter nights. I think it was colder inside than outside.
I felt so bad, Matt, because I'm thinking, for so long, I just put you over there at that other desk, and I'm like, no, that's not, man, I need to move him in front of the fireplace. I could have turned that fire on for you tonight, if it was too cold, and you could have just been snuggled down there and drinking some bourbon, having a good time.
Be careful. It's going to turn into like the set of a Lifetime movie before too long.
I can leave you guys alone if you need them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Wes. Like Mark kind of painting a weird picture over here.
Eastern Kentucky attorney returns back to Lexington to find his long lost friend. No, wait, no, that's not where we're headed tonight with this, right? So, all right, but all right, Matt, let everybody know who we have with us in case they're just joining us.
Back with us for round or session number 2 is Wes Henderson, the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Angel's Envy. Wes, welcome back. Thanks for sticking it out for another round with us here.
I'm bruised and beaten up a little bit, but I'm back in the ring, man. Let's go. Let's do it.
Oh yeah, man. We appreciate you hanging out with us and spending some time with us on it's Tuesday night. Yeah. So on a Tuesday night, what else better is to do than to hang out and drink a little bit of bourbon and rye, right?
every night of the week it's a good night for that.
It's a rough life. It's the bourbon life. Somebody's got to live it though, right?
Amen to that.
All right. So this next round, we have moved on to something a little bit different. So we call it the bourbon life, but you know what? We don't stick specifically just to bourbon. So do you want to tell everybody what we have poured up for this next round?
Yeah, we're going to try some Angel's Envy rye whiskey, which is a 6 to 8 year old rye whiskey, and then finished in a ex rum barrel for up to 18 months. So this is really the almost the opposite of the style of finishing of the bourbon. The bourbon, the port barrel finish of the bourbon was very subtle. And that was probably more in line with my dad's philosophy. And I think generationally, that subtlety. There's nothing subtle about this rum barrel finish at all. It's right there. It's right in front of you. It's rich. It's, every once in a while somebody says it's over the top, but I don't think so. I think it's a perfect balance when you finally really, when you taste it and start to experience it. But this is the best example of finishing I can probably give you, because I can put down a similar rye mash bill, like a Bullet Rye, for example, and then put it next to ours. And that's the best example of secondary barrel finishing I can give you to show you the difference. Exact same mash bill, same source initially. And now this is what happens after you finish it, for 18 months in a rum barrel.
So now this is the 95.5, is that right?
It is.
Okay.
I say traditional because it's it's really become, really because of MGP and, and with our rye that we're distilling now, it's become very commonplace to have that 95.5, and it's and the malted barley is really simply aiding the fermentation.
Yeah.
Add enzymes.
Yeah. It's funny because when I do some private tastings with people and they always ask me, so what's the difference between bourbon and rye? And then when I get into the description of rye, I'm like, well, it has to be at least 51% rye. And that, to me, that's what I call the barely legal rye, because you hit that 51%. And to me, that's more of a Kentucky kind of rye, where a lot of distillers will go for that minimum rye content. And then, the Indiana rye is what I guess you classify that or call that 95.5, at least in my opinion. That's kind of what I, call it, is the Indiana rye, where you get that really high rye content. Matt, shaking your head, I guess you agree with that analysis.
Yeah, I think we've all come to associate the 95.5 with Indiana.
Yeah. And that, this to me, well, I don't want to jump ahead too much, Matt. Let's talk about what you pick up on the nose on this one.
Oh man, I haven't even. So the glass is sitting across the table. I haven't even picked it up, and I can smell it. I could be blindfolded, and you could set this down in front of me, and I could tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah. So you're a fan of this.
This is one of my favorites all time, right here. And the nose on it is so sweet. It's got such a nice toasted sugar and graham cracker and a nice marshmallow nose to it, but that rye still comes through with a little bit of the spiciness, a little peppercorn on it, but it just got this really, really beautiful toasty sweet nose with it, leading like some caramel and just like a campfire, almost like s'mores.
Yeah, it's funny, Matt, because when I cracked this bottle open today, it was like an instant, to me, it was almost like a maple syrup, just a sweetness, a richness, a sugary smell. And now that it's been in the glass, I poured it out. It's almost like a maple syrup with like a walnuts or some type of nuts added to it, pecans, walnuts, or something. But it's the nose on it's crazy. And, we talked earlier a few minutes ago about Chris and, Woodford Brown-Forman, and, they do the 1910, the double barreled, and they do the, double oaked out at Woodford. And that's done specifically to be out of balance. I mean, it's not a balanced bourbon because, you're finishing in that secondary barrel. And this one, to me, it kind of falls in that category because you've got a rye that you take that's 95.5, you put it in another barrel. So it's not gonna fall into the category of what you would consider to be typical rye nose or typical rye palate. And so it's out of balance. But you know what? If being out of balance is wrong, I don't want to be right, Wes.
Well, I mean, it was created to be that way, and I don't know not that I don't know. I know that when I first started doing the blends on this, that Dad was less than impressed with the notion of the finish like that. And I didn't know this till after he had passed away. That he had told my wife, we were sitting in the kitchen one day, and I was telling Dad what I was doing with the rye. And I left the room, and my wife was still in the room with my dad, and my dad's like shaking his head, like, "What the hell, you know? This is craziness." But he ended up, coming around. I guess I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but he ended up embracing, what happened here, and and let me get back to the nose, and as you can tell already, I digress all the time when I talk, but. One of the fun things about the rye is that, sweetness is really not an aroma, but there are things that we smell that we associate with sweetness. And
right.
I think that with the rye, when you first smell the rye, you're expecting this syrupy, over the top flavor. And you definitely get some sweetness when you taste the rye, but it's nowhere near the level of sweetness that you might anticipate from the nose. Mm-hmm. Which I think, which makes it fun. It's kind of a pump fake, maybe a little bit. Yeah, exactly. I've done that in years. But when we get on to tasting here, it's the same situation. When you guys call out some of the taste notes as well.
Yeah. So going back, let's talk a little. We talked about you and your history and how you got in the business and working with your dad. So kind of let's talk a little bit about the history itself of Angel's Envy and how you guys decided to get it going and what you guys have done and how everything. Because I think you started. Seems like I saw something that said Angel's Envy was actually founded in 2006. Is that right?
The idea started hatching probably about then. We incorporated in 2009, and we had planned on launching in October of 2010, but we delayed it until March of 2011. So it's been almost 10 years exactly from
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. From the launch, which seems crazy.
Yeah. So you guys, your dad was in retirement and you just said, "Hey, Dad, I've got an idea."
That's really what it boiled down to. And a friend of mine, a guy named Jay Maltby, Jay's been in the spirits industry for a long time, Cruzan rum and a bunch of other really cool products. And I was talking with Jay one day. I was consulting on a project, and Jay said, just out of curiosity, you're helping with this project, but why haven't you ever done anything with your dad? And I'm like, Jay, honestly, I don't know. And I think some of it is that I always felt like I had to do my own thing first before I ever.
Sure.
And it was probably an insane, it was probably crazy to feel that way. I might have had a lot longer to work with my father. Well, I don't know, because he would have stayed at Brown-Forman. He would have.
Right.
So, things worked out the way they needed to work out. Mm-hmm. But when Jay mentioned that, it kind of got the thought process going. So I flew up to Kentucky. I was living in Florida, and sat down with Dad and told him what I wanted to do and asked him if he was interested in doing it. And he immediately agreed. And to this day, I don't believe either one of us knew what we were getting into. And I don't even know if Dad knew that we could pull it off. I don't even know if I knew we could pull it off. But, we figured we'd give it a shot. And, and Dad always said, in interviews and, and in private and public, that the only reason he did this was to work with me and work with his grandsons. That way he didn't have anything to prove.
Right.
Like Woodford was a walk-off home run. I think he was most proud of Old Forester. Now, he didn't create Old Forester, but how he curated Old Forester and how he worked with that brand for a long time. Mm-hmm. So
sure,
he had already reached the pinnacle, right?
Yeah. So and that's true. There was nothing for him really to try to prove. But it's funny that we talked off camera a little bit. We had Fred and Freddie Noe on, and it was fun to talk to Fred about working with his dad, and how sometimes when he was a kid, a teenager, et cetera, there was no way that he would ever want to do that. But then as he got older, it's like, yeah, this is all right. But then there's all these little intricacies that go along with working with your dad. So what was that like? Obviously your dad is I guess, there's no other way to say it. I mean, he's a bourbon legend, so, I mean, what was it like to get to work with him on a project to create an entirely new brand?
It was a joy. I mean, Dad and I worked very well together. Our skill sets really complemented, each other. Dad more than anything just sat back and, and really kind of validated things as we went along. Dad had a very light touch, and Dad had faith in my abilities to build a business, to create a brand, and ultimately, creating the profiles and creating the special releases we've done and creating the rye. So, but Dad was really a very steady, quiet presence, kind of in the background. Just a light touch, I mean, and it was a lot of fun. It really was. And I know Dad enjoyed getting out more than anything. He loved talking to people about bourbon, put him in a bar and let him talk to, let him tell stories about bourbon. And, he was really in his element. So it was a joy for me to see him live. And I really believe the last few years, Dad was a melanoma survivor for a long time. And I think in the back of my mind, I knew that would probably come back.
Sure.
So the last, Dad being able to do what he loves so much till the very end, really until a few weeks before he died, was probably a great, not only a great thing for him, was an amazing experience for me as well. And,
sure.
And kids and his grandsons.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, as a son, my father is still alive, but he's in his upper 70s. So I can't imagine, how that would be to be able to share that experience and to work with my dad on a project like that, and to see it, come to fruition and to be so successful. That's got to just be great. And speaking of working with your sons, obviously, you work with, initially you worked with 2 of your sons, but I think now you're working with 4 of your sons. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So 4 of the 6 work in the business now. Kyle is our production manager. Andrew is our lead distiller. He does the magic on the distillation, leads that team. Spencer and Connor work out in our main warehouse facility and on the maturation side. So they're curating the barrels out there. They're handling everything related to that. And ultimately I want them to have different experiences in different areas of the company. So,
Sure.
I mean, pretty much all worked everywhere. They've worked in blending, they've worked in bottling, they've worked in distillation,
Mm-hmm.
they've worked in, management roles, and, especially Kyle. So I want them to learn everything. So it's been a lot of fun. It's probably been more of a challenge managing those relationships than it was working with my father, just because there's so many personalities there.
Sure.
And then you've got sibling competition, which is real.
Yeah.
But they're great kids, and they're very well grounded, and they've learned so much. I'm so proud of what they know about the business now. So a lot of times I just sit back and let them go.
Yeah. And it's fun because I've been over there for a couple of different of the releases, and I can't remember off the top of my head which ones they were, but back before COVID, when you guys were doing media events over there at the distillery. And it was fun because it was you and your 2 sons, that Kyle and Andrew, that were leading the sessions and talking us through everything. And it was really unique because you would obviously start the session, but then kind of step back and kind of let them do their thing, which is really cool. So I wondered, as a dad, what that's like working and supervising and overseeing your kids.
It's so much fun. It really is. And it's a blessing to be able to do it 99% of the time.
99. And then there's that 1%.
Yes, there's that 1%.
And that's why we have Angels Envy Rye. So we can, at that 1% moment, we can take a drink. So
yes,
yeah.
we can. And we
All right, getting back to the rye, Matt, on the palate and finish. What are you getting on that?
I have to really agree with what Wes was saying, where the nose and the palate are similar, but the palate is a lot more subdued with from the sweet flavors that you might smell on the nose when you drink it and when you play with the palate, you can really tell that it's rye. You're not drinking the same nose. It's got a nice rye punch to it. I get a good amount of citrus. It's nice and zesty. It's got that, some of the baking spices are coming through. There is still the sweetness in it, but it certainly doesn't have the same taste that it has on the same nose. I think if it tasted the same way that it smelled, I don't know, I'd be curious to wonder if there was like some maple syrup or something added in.
Well, it would probably be over the top.
Yeah,
you know,
I think that's a good way to put it, Wes. You're absolutely right, and it's nice to be able to smell it and smell something so sweet and so the nose. I don't want to say it's over the top, but it's strong. It's got that really, really nice sweet nose, but then when you consume it and you drink it, it takes you back to the rye that's in there.
Yep, I agree with that, Matt.
That's really what it should do. And that was really the delicate balance to strike here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dance. It's between the sweetness and the spiciness, and what can happen when you've got so many bold flavors competing against one another. You can get this jumbled up mess where you can't pull anything out of it. And I think that the rye is able to kind of hit all those notes along the way, that's where we really succeeded in making something that really hit all the right spots.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with in what Matt said too. It's funny because when you smell it on the nose, there's that sweetness, and and like Matt said, I mean, to me, you would think like Taconics. Or is it whoever that has the maple?
Yeah, the
syrup.
double maple.
Yeah, they have the double maple barrel. So you think, this is like finished in a maple syrup barrel or something. We know there's some maple syrup in it or whatever. But then you taste it and it's like, damn, that's a rye whiskey. I mean, there's no second guessing about that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, that's a rye whiskey, and it when you taste it. And going back, like with the bourbon, like I said, it's got those standard, what I would consider typical bourbon notes to it. But you can obviously detect the finishing notes as well that add to that, which makes it unique. But this rye, it's funny how many people, when I ask them about rye whiskey, and they say the Angel's Envy rye is their favorite rye whiskey. It happens a lot. So
I love it. And it really defies description. There's really not, it's almost its own thing. I mean, it's definitely recognizable as a rye, but it's such a departure. Mm-hmm. If you took 5 of the other whatever top rye whiskeys and put them next to us, there's really no, you can't confuse ours with any of the other ones.
Right.
Stretch, and that's okay. I mean, it may not be for everybody. I think it's for most people, because very rarely do I hear people say I don't like it. Of course, people probably wouldn't tell me to my face they don't like it anyway, but just to be polite. But another thing about the rye I think is unique, and it's an interesting discussion to have, is the proof and the perception of proof. And this is 100 proof. Right. And I truly believe that this doesn't drink like it's 100 proof. And
right.
So it's the actual proof and our perception of the proof. They're two very, very different things. So I'd say it's dangerously drinkable.
Yeah, that's a good point you make, Wes. I think this should it should come with a large sticker on the bottle,
a warning label.
Yeah, reminds people this is still 100 proof.
Yeah, and that's funny because normally at the beginning of the discussion, we talk about what the proof is, and we forgot to do that. So yes, this is 100 proofer. And before the 86.6, I said it drinks a little bit hotter to me, or not hotter, but it drinks like a higher proof bourbon in the mid to upper 90s, maybe. This 100 proofer does not drink like what I would consider a 100 proof rye to drink like. So yes, this one could easily sneak up on you.
Yeah. This is kind of my go-to a lot. When I'm out, I find it very comforting. especially in the winter.
Yeah.
It's a little chilly outside. And by the way, it makes killer bananas Foster. You can flambe.
Oh,
You can flambe your bananas Foster with it, which I'm very fond of doing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yep. I'm gonna have to figure that. Matt's a well, I keep saying chef, so Matt says no, but Matt's been in the industry quite some time, or was in the industry. So maybe Matt and I can get together and figure that out.
Yeah, just do it instead of using. A lot of people use 151 or Grand Marnier. Flambe, their bananas Foster, and the rye just adds a whole other dimension to it. It makes the most expensive bananas Foster you'll ever have. It's well worth it.
I was going to say it's got to be it's worth it. There's no question about it. Yeah. So, all right, guys, we're at the end of round number 2. So, final thoughts, closing out, Matt, on the Angel's Envy, the rye, finishing the rum barrels.
Oh, it's an absolute hit. This is in my go-to. There will always be one on the bar at my house, at my parents' house.
Right.
It's all time for me. It's in my favorite ryes for certain. Just the uniqueness of it, but it is still knowing that there is rye whiskey in there. You're not just drinking a bottle of maple syrup. Or whatever.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Pull the maple syrup off the shelf, have a couple of swigs of it.
Yeah, just out of the fridge every once in a while. As long as it's maple, right, from Vermont, you're good. It's Matt. I just have to agree with you on that. This is such a good rye, and I think we've talked about. And I don't want to keep going back to it, but I'm going to. The Brown Foreman, Chris Morris, whatever, Woodford Reserve, et cetera. The double oaked and the Old Forester 1910, to me, the double barreled bourbons, they have just almost like a dessert type of quality to them. And for me, this rye has almost that same type of dessert type of quality to it. And that, to me, that's not a bad thing. It's just something that it's very unique, and this is something that after a nice meal that I would gladly pour up for my friends and for myself and say, hey, look, let's have a little dessert and let's have some Angel's Envy rye and enjoy that. So,
and that's I see it sometimes on dessert menus now. Drinks similar to a nice Madeira or port or cognac or brandy,
right?
After dinner, it's definitely, I didn't set it out for it to be like that, but
right.
Those are some really good thoughts.
Yep, definitely. Well, all right, guys, we're going to close it out. We'll get a word from our sponsor, and we'll come back with our final session with Wes Henderson from Angel's Envy. So everybody just sit tight, and we'll be right back. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. We want to take just a second and tell you a little bit about 3 Chord Whiskey. 3 Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call perfectly tuned taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them all together. After each blend is completed, the 3 Chord team then applies their proprietary process of pyrolysis, that's a lot to say, isn't it? Which involves heating American oak to precise temperatures to release specific flavor and aroma compounds. Then they use another proprietary method called rhythmic disruption process, and that's more than just playing music to a bunch of barrels, which integrates all of those related compounds into the blended spirit. Finally, each small batch blend of 3 Chord is evaluated by a trained sensory panel to ensure an uncommon depth of flavor, character, aroma, and a perfectly tuned taste in each bottle. With their introductory blended bourbon, their Amplify Rye, Strange Collaboration, which is a Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, their 94 rated 12-bar reserve, and the brand new highly coveted 15-year Kentucky bourbon they call the Whiskey Drummer, there's a lot of options available from 3 Chord. Like the feeling you get when you hear that perfect song, you'll know that the 3 Chord line of whiskeys are right from the first sip. They resonate with so much flavor, you'll want an encore. Find out more about 3 Chord whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my friend Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Oh, Mark, man, I am doing so great tonight. We're having a super good show, a really great time, hanging out with Wes Henderson of Angel's Envy. And as we always say to our listeners, you've made it this far, so you best stick around for the exciting conclusion. Because
Please.
we've got something newer poured up. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. And Wes does not necessarily have the same thing that we've poured up tonight. But I don't know, Wes, you've got one over there with you, I'm assuming. Or...
I'll be with you in spirit on this one.
All right.
I'm gonna keep drinking the rye, honestly.
That's fun.
But I really want to hear, the single barrel program is new, and you guys have some of the first bottles from the program. So it's nice to, I'm just as interested in hearing your all's thoughts as you all might be hearing mine.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll jump in here and just say, since Matt doesn't have the bottle, I'm sorry, Matt, but I've got, listen, you hear that? I love, I mean, that's so cool. There's angel's wings that are affixed to the bottle, wrapped around the neck. And I mean, it's like metal. So the metal wings hit the glass. You guys can probably hear that. That number one, Wes, is a great touch. I mean, I absolutely love that. But yeah, this is a single barrel. This is from Total Wine. I picked this up here in Lexington over at Hamburg. This one is 109.6 proof. So I mean, going back to the bourbon itself, Wes, is this the same bourbon that we get from the flagship?
It is.
Okay. All right. So same bourbon, same mash bill, everything same. Now the finishing not the finishing, but the age is it the same age bourbon pretty much?
It's pretty similar. They're all over the board. We offer a lot of different choices to our clients when they're picking stuff. So I didn't really participate in this one directly, but we have a pretty wide range. I'd say an average of probably 5 years and varying times finishing in the port barrel as well. But the most noticeably, most of them are over 100 proof. Yeah.
And this one, like I said, it's 109.6 proof, and the color on this one is so much. I don't want to say so much darker, but I mean there is you can detect it versus 86.6 proof up to 109.6. You can really see the difference when it's in the glass, and that's the second thing. The angel's wings that cling on the glass, or the bottle. That's the first thing. Second thing is the color of the bourbon itself coming out of the bottle. So, Matt, you're over there working it. What are you picking up over there?
Well, the first thing I think you hit right on, Mark, is the color of it. It's got this really, really deep brown, like a chestnut red color to it.
Red. There's a redness to it.
Like a really, really pretty color, and just it really clings well to the glass. But on the nose, I'm picking up, it's got a more of a savory nose that I find than the 86.6 proof. I'm getting a little more of the grape, a little more currant in it as well. Little more of the rye spice coming too, a little more of the peppercorn with it.
Gotcha.
And I think maybe a touch more of the oak as well.
To me, Matt, when I put this to my nose, the first thing that stands out to me is leather. And I know that sounds weird to say that, but there's some of these finished bourbons that I pick up. Something that comes to mind was the Belle Meade Madeira that we've tried before. Mm-hmm. And the initial nose on that to me was really, I got a lot of the leather, and people are like, how do you know what leather smells or tastes like? Well, when I was a kid and played baseball, I spent a lot of time in the outfield and I got bored. And, there are times you just chew on your glove because you got nothing better to do with your time. So yes, I do know what leather smells and tastes like, but, and that sounds weird to say that, but it's not a bad thing. People might say, oh, leather, really? But, to me, I find that very unique in a bourbon, especially a bourbon when it's finished in a cask. So that stands out to me, and I really enjoy that. So,
That's not an unusual observation, even though you think it sounds like it.
yeah,
A lot of when I drink pre-prohibition bourbons, especially, you pick up a lot of that leather and tobacco and other things like that as well. So it's not and because we don't really know what it tasted like when back in the day,
right.
we don't know whether or not that's a result of, years of being in the bottle and oxidation or whatever. We just don't know. But I think that's those characteristics. Like I said, I see them all the time when I drink some of the older stuff.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad to know that I'm not completely off.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I'm not completely off the reservation with this. So, earlier I mentioned the bottles, and we were going to get back to that, I think, in round 2, and we forgot to do that. So, Wes, can you talk a little bit about the bottles, the design, the shape, the Angel's Wings, the name itself? I mean, can you kind of fill us in on that?
Sure. I mean, the simplest explanation is that it was inspired by the Angel Share. And
Sure.
Most likely anybody listening to this podcast knows what the Angel Share is. It's what we lose to evaporation. We lose 3 to 5% to evaporation every year. And we say we're sharing that with the angels. So the story is angels get their share. What's left, they're envious of, and that's where the name Angel's Envy came from. And really, we keyed in on Angel Share very early on, and we might have named the brand Angel Share, but there were some trademark issues there. So and I'm glad for that, because
Right.
that allowed us to think a little further, to go a little deeper and play with the story a little bit. And so when you think of angels, I think of Angel's Wings, and I always wanted I wanted wings on the bottle. So the shape of the bottle really conformed to the shape of wings. And there's really nothing like it. There still isn't really anything like it now.
Right.
But you talk about finishing and being, stepping out and being unusual. This bottle was risky a little bit, I think, because there was nothing like it. It's got a little femininity to it. It wasn't your traditional bourbon bottle.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Of course, now I think it's very recognizable, and it's I'm gonna say mainstream at all, because there's still really not much like it, but it's a little sexy, it's
Oh yeah.
it's but not over the top.
No, I completely agree, and I can see, the wings on the back that come through. You can obviously see that, and I love the fact that you guys pay tribute to your dad from the cellars of Lincoln Henderson on your bottles. Very cool. But yeah, the shape of the bottle itself, it's almost like the wings that are a little maybe tucked in, or it's just really nice. So I was wondering, the S, though, the S is small and underlined. Is there any significance to that?
Nope. I mean, it's kind of like an apostrophe, really.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you look at it, the font is unique too. It's called a Big Noodle font. It's what the name of the font is that we use.
That's funny.
I think I've ever shared in a interview before.
A Bourbon Life exclusive.
Yeah.
There you go. You heard it first here. And really, look, I wanted something on the back of the bottle. This is going to sound really goofy, but this is really where the thought came into play. And I always liked the Bowmore bottles, ships on the back. Yep. And I thought it was really cool how you could look in the front of the bottle, and through the whiskey you could see the ship in the back. I just thought that was cool,
Right.
And I wanted that effect. And it wouldn't have mattered what we named the bourbon. I mean, we could have named it, furry puppy dog, and we could have put a a puppy or a baby. You know, people love puppies and babies.
Sure they do.
And angels.
And angels.
So the notion of having something on the back of the bottle that you could see through the bottle was kind of the inspiration for that, and it stuck.
Yeah, I mean the design is beautiful, and I love this private selection. You know, especially with the wings wrapped around it, and it's got engraving on the back of the wings. You know, keep clicking this. People can probably hear these wings clicking around, but it says that it was privately selected, and it says in 2020. And it's got Angel's Envy on it, so really just a really cool bottle.
And we probably should have, you know, it's kind of like a little, for those of you know, you're describing it, it's almost like a little angel medallion, you know,
Yeah, right.
A charm almost. We should have made it long enough where you could wear it like a medallion.
I really like the name Angel's Envy because I think it inspires, at least I think of it as a lot of kind of juxtaposition and almost like oxymoronical, because an angel isn't really supposed to be envious. Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins. I wouldn't really think of an angel as exhibiting envy. So I kind of enjoy that. I don't know if maybe there's some similarities one could draw to the bourbon and the rye as well, where there's like maybe just like a touch of juxtaposition and taking a beautiful straight bourbon and straight rye and finishing it in different barrels. I don't know if that's ever been thought of, or if I'm just deep into section number 3 here. I think that's pretty neat.
I actually like it, and I think there's also some, you know, one of the things we thought about too is a little bit of tension there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
You know, between they're angels. Angels are supposed to,
Yes.
supposed to represent all that's good and pure. But you've also got these whiskey angels out there that are maybe a little more reckless, and so there's that tension, and really about the same time, we launched Angel's Envy a few months after Beam launched Devil's Cut, and there was obviously no relationship between the two, but people used to ask me, because and then they started running commercials for Devil's Cut like ad nauseum. I mean,
yeah.
The commercial was something about Devil's Cut, and it was explaining the angel share.
Right.
And people would ask me, they say, "Wes, aren't you pissed that Devil's Cut is talking about your brand essentially?" I'm like, hell no, they're spending millions of dollars telling my story, which is perfectly fine with me.
They're getting my brand out there. How could I be mad about that?
God bless them, keep spending money. But that's just one of those funny happenstance things. And, every once in a while somebody will mention Devil's Cut and is there any relationship? But, there's that tension, between the good and kind of good.
Sure. The kind of good. Yeah. The good and kind of good,
Yeah.
But so this is definitely the good. I would put that up there for sure. So now you guys have started doing a few other things too. So you've got the flagship, you got the rye. Now you've started this single barrel program, but you've got some special releases that you do on a regular basis. Now you're doing the cellar collection. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with that and how that's worked and what your vision is with that?
The vision is really starting to come together, after we've got some order to the chaos a little bit, as far as just, innovation and not really having I say we've had a plan, but we've grouped some of these releases into what we call the cellar collection.
Right.
And the first release in the cellar collection was a sherry finish a couple years ago now. It's hard to believe it was a couple years ago, but we lost. Right. I think really with COVID, it's, you can throw that year out. So it's really only been.
You know what? Number 3, COVID sucks. And we're just going to say number 3, 2020, we just write it off and forget about the entire year. So
exactly. Done. I wonder if they can do that with our taxes too. I wonder if we can just write off.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I'm with you on that one.
I put the suggestion box at the IRS on that. So then the next one was the tawny port finish, which I think was both of them were very unique. And then we had the founders release, the Mizunara, the Japanese finish. back in earlier of 2020, which was received in ways that I couldn't imagine, with lines wrapped around the block.
That was crazy. Obviously we started as an Instagram site, right? So, we got 47,000 followers on there, and we keep up with social media and everything, and being over in Lexington. I mean, we know what's going on, and it was amazing. Crazy.
Yeah, it really was. And when I see some of the prices on the secondary market for these,
Yeah.
in a way, I'm horrified, but at the same point in time, I'm like, oh wow, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, here, speaking of secondary, I'm not going to harp on that. I'm not going to really talk about it, but it was funny.
Go ahead. Say it.
It was funny because I guess probably a year or two ago, I guess when you guys did the El Rosa release, and somebody apparently had come over, they were in your distillery, they bought a bottle, and they snapped a picture and put it on the secondary market from your gift shop. Yeah, in the distillery. And your son, I can't remember, one of your sons actually commented and said, look, you know what? If you're going to do this, at least do me the courtesy to not be in my distillery and posting my bottle for 2 times or whatever, whatever we sold it to you for. So I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember that. We kind of expected that, the minute that, look, it is what it is. I think that unfortunately the secondary, prices a lot of people out, which is unfortunate.
Sure.
But, I think any producer that, this fake outrage about the secondary market, look, it's bolstered a lot of brands that nobody knew about or cared about. So, I wouldn't be too outraged about it. But it does kind of suck in some ways too.
Sure. But, I don't want to say any press is good press, but if your bottles are out there and people are willing to pay 2 or 3 times, the retail for it, obviously that says something about what people think about your product. So that's
absolutely. How can you not be honored by, people that appreciate, this is our craft. Really,
right.
These are things that we've created and nurtured, and, us put a lot of thought and sweat and, time away from our families and all these things. And that there's that deep of an appreciation for that is really amazing to me. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yep. I can understand that. So let's talk a little bit, just real quick. You guys do everything every year. You do a Toast to the Trees thing. And that's something that always stands out to me on social media, on Instagram, especially because I see, when I check it, I see all the posts about Toast to the Trees. So can you talk a little bit about that and share with our viewers what that's about?
So every September for Bourbon Heritage Month, we do something called Toast the Trees. And during Toast the Trees for that month, anytime you post a picture of an Angel's Envy cocktail or Angel's Envy, however you're drinking it, and hashtag Toast the Trees, we plant an oak tree. And I don't know what our goal is this year. Last year we did, I guess close to 50,000 trees.
Wow.
I don't remember the precise number because it's been a while, but it's a great program. And it started out as something, very small. And I thought, well, this is something fun we'll do this year, and didn't really think about the long-term implications of it. But now I've seen, we've planted probably close to 100,000 trees, or more by now over the last several years, and in areas that have been deforested, by strip mining or whatever. And it truly makes a difference. It takes 80 years for an oak tree to grow to where we can harvest it for a barrel. So we have now actually planted more oak than what we have used, which I think is really cool.
That's super cool.
So sustainability, things that I never thought about as a child of the 80s, sustainability was not something we thought about when we were, buying McDonald's burgers and styrofoam non-biodegradable containers and things like that. But now sustainability is really one of our pillars, and to be able to do that is and not only is it fun for the company and doing the right thing, it's enlightened me, about
Sure.
the importance of sustainability and the environment.
Yeah, that's really cool. Matt, that's right up your alley,
Yeah,
right?
I was just gonna say thank you, Wes. That is right up my alley. It's really great to hear from people that take the good and make it better. Use their name and their notoriety and their brands to promote such great equitable funds and good things, especially for the environment. In my opinion, I think that's one of our, if not our most valuable resource that we're quickly diminishing. But anyway,
I agree completely.
Matt's going to digress
Yeah.
on that one.
That's okay, Matt. Look, I mean, I love it because I've evolved. I've
Sure.
evolved to where a lot of things I never thought about, and I truly believe a lot of it's generational.
Right.
The things that I think about now that I didn't think about or care about.
Mhm.
Right.
And that to me has been one of the joys about doing this program is a lot of people younger than me have taught me a lot about the importance of this rock that we live on, and how important it is that we do the right thing with it.
Very nice. So let's talk about, before we close it out, because we're getting close to the end here. So before we close it out, though, let's talk about the future, Angel's Envy and Wes Henderson. Can you tell us a little bit about where the future lies for both?
Well, I'm going to Florida in a few weeks.
Hey, all right, we'll be down. Where are you headed to? Cape Sandblast is my favorite place.
Yeah, it's the immediate future to a non-disclosed location on the Atlantic coast of Florida.
Very nice.
We're continuing to grow. We purchased 140 acres out in Henry County, which is a semi-rural area adjacent to where we are now, and
Right.
building warehouses.
Nice.
We'll eventually build another distillery out there, probably, because we're almost at capacity downtown, and create kind of maybe a rural home place as well, which is and grow some of our own grains. And we're still in the master plan of that, and really just continue to do what we're doing. Grow the brand, but grow it in a way that is controlled and preserves what we've created. And that's really the challenge, is to as you grow so quickly, is to keep that magic and be true to the foundation that you've built, and not drift. You're constantly having to correct for drift, and you're constantly having to keep the things in place that make Angel's Envy special as you scale it. And that's been the challenge so far, and I think we've met it. It hasn't really hasn't, but we're going to be growing a lot more, so we have to keep the magic. We really do.
Yep. Very nice. All right. So I did read somewhere you are a volunteer fireman. So how'd that happen? How'd that come from?
I have no idea how that happened. I actually now, of 4 of my sons, well, let's see, we've got me, Andrew, Connor, and Spencer, so that's 4, are in emergency services, and in the fire service, or I haven't been doing as much in the fire service because I'm getting old now and I'm falling apart. I'm working in another aspect, more on the law enforcement side and investigation side, which I thoroughly enjoy. But that's a whole oddball conversation, probably, about that could take another podcast. But I actually do death investigations with the coroner's office now.
Oh, okay.
Which is probably one of the most fascinating things I've ever done, and
wow.
But one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and working with families, and it's a very difficult job, as you can imagine.
Sure.
Very, we deal with a lot of stuff that most people, would never want to deal with. But, we're helping people in probably the worst day of their life,
Sure.
Sure. I get a lot of, it's very rewarding to me. And it's very important as a family that we that we do the right things and in our community that's been so generous to us. And I think we've kind of felt like that working in emergency services is one way that we can do that.
That's great. My brother is he's a paramedic and a fireman in Upper Arlington in Ohio, and he's done that for 25 plus years and just retired. And his son has taken his place as a fireman and paramedic on the same squad. So it's really cool. So I appreciate that. And, thank you obviously for your service, because it's a very valuable service that you guys provide and what you do to help the community. So that means a lot. So that's really cool that you still participate and do that. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, man.
Yeah. All right. So getting back to the distillery. So you guys open for tours now, or you still closed down with COVID, right? COVID number 4, we can blame COVID, right?
Yeah, we're open. The retail is open. We are doing limited experiences. So you can come, and we're doing tasting experiences, and some areas of the plant are off limits, just
Okay. Mm-hmm.
to keep our teammates safe, really. Sure. At the end of the day, and not to interrupt production. If we have people that are sick or whatever, then we have to shut down, and that's not good either. But most importantly, we want to protect the team. So the Bourbon Trail, the people on the Bourbon Trail and the KDA have worked very closely from the very beginning, when all this started going down, about coordinating how we were going to respond, best practices. And I'm really proud of the industry and how we said right away, look, I mean, these brand homes are very important, or they make a lot of money for us, but we've got to do what's right for our team and for the public in general. So we were one of the first to shut down. Our industry is really one of the first to shut down, and then a phased reopening. So hopefully we'll be open more, maybe in the fall, maybe by summer or fall, like everybody else were.
Yeah, fingers crossed and hoping we get there, right?
Yeah, exactly. But thanks for asking about that. And come and see us, by the way. It's a beautiful distillery, it really is.
Yeah, it is. I love it down there. I've been there a couple of times. So, all right. So we're at the end of. Well, we've exceeded our time. So,
I didn't go as long as Fred No, did I? Though
that's right. You did not go as long as Fred and Freddie No. So, but you did a great job. So we're getting close to it.
I believe in quality, not quantity. So, Fred, if you're listening to this, then I'm sorry, but I didn't go as long as you. But I was much more interesting. So
the quality was much more. Yeah, there you go. All right, so Matt, let's go back and revisit our single barrel here that we're drinking. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think the more it's sat out and has gotten some air in it, your comment about leather, Mark, is becoming more and more true for me. It's smelling a little bit more of taking on those leather tones and a little earthier. It's got more of an earthy nose, and the taste is coming through that way too. But I get a lot of good cherry, a lot of I think the port wine barrel is really imparting a lot more on the palate for this one, getting like a little blackberry, the cherry, those dark stone fruits in the current. And then there's a little bit of that spice coming through at the end. And it's got a really nice long finish. The finish is after my first sip, it was still finishing for another minute or two later. I was still playing with the finish and tasting it. So it's got a really nice finish.
Yeah, I agree with that, Matt. It goes on. And I'm sitting here, I took my last drink like 30 seconds ago, and I'm still getting the finish on that. But the leather comes through. To me, that's the way I describe it. And I enjoy that. So, but the stone fruits, the cherry, when you mentioned that, Matt, it was like, oh yeah, like we talked about bananas earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, now I see the cherries in that. So I definitely picked that up. So, yeah, big fan of this. I love it. I think if you get the opportunity to pick up one of these new single barrels from Angel's Envy, definitely pick that up. So, all right. I guess we'll wrap it up here. Matt, Wes, before we close it out, anything else you guys want to add?
It's been fun. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. I like the I like the rounds. I think that was a lot of fun as well. And I hope everybody listening found something interesting, which I'm sure they did. You guys had some great observations, and it's a good time, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that. Matt, before we wrap it out, anything?
Yeah, thank you, Wes. We appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us and go through what you all are doing at Angel's Envy and to fill us in a little bit on your life as well. I think just as valuable as teaching our listeners about bourbon and getting to taste it with them is letting them know who it is that's putting the bourbon out. And you've got a great story, and I learned a lot as well. So it was really cool to hear your story and to get to chat with you more. Hopefully next time we'll be able to do this in person.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yep, that sounds good. All right. So with that said, Matt, thank you very much. I'm going to thank our sponsors again, the Stave Restaurant out in Millville, Kentucky. Check them out online, thestavekentucky.com, or go visit them. Again, they have indoor seating available now. Just a great restaurant. So if you're on the Bourbon Trail, you need to stop over there and get some food from them. But then also we want to thank 3 Chord Bourbon, our newest sponsor, and just we appreciate everything they're doing. And Ari Sussman, the master blender, is just doing a great job with those guys. So check them out online at 3chordbourbon.com. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.